Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive into a pretty serious topic today. How international policy can, well, shift pretty dramatically, often driven by events on the ground and pressing humanitarian concerns.
That's right. And our focus for this deep dive, based on the sources we've looked at, is this really notable evolution, you could say a hardening, in France's official stance and its actions towards Israel, specifically concerning Gaza.
Yeah, we've pulled from quite a mix here. Articles, official statements from the government, various reports trying to get, different perspectives on what's been unfolding. So our mission really is to get you up to speed fast.
Yeah.
What exactly is this shift in French policy? What specific things are being discussed or even enacted, according to these sources?
And the why behind it, the reasons cited.
Exactly. And maybe what it signals, for the bigger picture diplomatically.
So right off the bat, the sources are pretty clear. There's been a significant toughening of France's political and diplomatic language towards the Israeli government. It's described as intensifying.
Okay, intensifying.
And crucially, this isn't just talk. The material suggests France is now backing, or at least seriously considering, tangible actions.
Right, tangible actions. That's the key bit.
Yeah.
So what specific concrete steps did the sources actually describe? What's on the table?
Well, the French Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Christophe Lemoine, he's mentioned in the reports supporting a comprehensive review of European policy towards Tel Aviv.
A comprehensive review of EU policy. That sounds potentially significant.
It is. And this review, according to what we read, would involve activating several specific measures.
Okay, like what?
Two key potential actions really stand out in the sources. One is a review of the EU-Israel Association Agreement.
Ah, okay. That's the main treaty, isn't it? Covering trade, politics.
Exactly. It's the bedrock of the relationship. The sources really underscore that the EU is Israel's largest trading partner. So messing with that agreement, even reviewing it, is a powerful diplomatic and economic tool.
Right, targeting the foundation. What else? Were other measures mentioned?
Yeah, there's also talk of potentially expanding sanctions.
Sanctions. Against?
The sources specifically mention targeting more Israeli individuals, particularly those described as being involved in violence, both in the West Bank and in Gaza.
So specific economic levers, like the agreement and targeted individual actions. What's the justification given? Why this shift now?
The spokesperson, Lemoine, his words are quoted pretty directly. He condemned what France termed a disproportionate escalation by the Israeli military in Gaza.
Okay.
And he also highlighted severe restrictions on humanitarian aid, the reason given. He explicitly stated these policies are seen as unacceptable under international humanitarian law.
Framed very clearly, then, in terms of international law and the humanitarian crisis. Now, when a country makes a shift like this, there's usually friction. What did the sources say about that? Any pushback?
Oh, definitely. The reports detail France strongly rejecting Israeli accusations of anti-Semitism. Lemoine is quoted calling those claims shameful and baseless.
Right.
And he made a point of reiterating France's commitment to fighting anti-Semitism, drawing a distinction.
And there was a specific incident mentioned, too, wasn't there? Something that added to the tension.
Yes. The sources mentioned the summoning of the Israeli ambassador in Paris. This happened after a shooting incident in Jenin that apparently targeted European diplomats. So that clearly strained relations further.
Okay, so tensions are high. How did Israeli officials react to this firmer stance from France and maybe Europe more broadly, based on what you read?
Well, according to the reports, Israel has basically labeled these positions, French and European, as hostile.
Hostile. Wow.
Yeah, and accused Paris of sort of abandoning its traditional support, especially after the October 7th attacks.
But the French Foreign Ministry didn't completely withdraw support, did they? They made a distinction.
No, exactly. The sources note the ministry reaffirmed France's support for Israel's right to self-defense. But they drew a very clear line, condemning what they called mass violations against civilians in Gaza.
So a conditional support, it sounds like.
Kind of. And this isn't just France acting alone, right? The sources paint this as part of a wider European discussion.
Yeah, you mentioned that review of the association agreement.
Right. And the figures cited suggest it's significant. Apparently 17 out of the 27 EU countries now support reviewing that agreement.
17? That's a majority.
It is. And the sources highlight this as a real shift from Europe's, traditionally more cautious approach towards Israel.
And it's not just ministry officials. This seems to be coming from the very top in France.
Yes, President Macron's statements were featured prominently. He's quoted using really strong language, calling what Israel is doing in Gaza unacceptable.
Unacceptable. That's direct. What else did the sources say about his position?
He has reportedly called for an immediate ceasefire and, critically, unrestricted entry for humanitarian aid. He even issued a warning, something like France will not stand idly by.
Strong words.
The material also noted he's backing Egypt's mediation efforts, planning to coordinate with Cairo.
And he seemed to connect the immediate crisis to the longer-term picture, too.
He did, yeah. The sources quoted him warning that the current actions could lead to catastrophe. And he stressed that military options, well, they're no substitute for a political solution.
Okay, so beyond the immediate Gaza situation, the sources also pointed to France taking a more active role on the broader Palestinian statehood issue.
Yes, that came through. France is described as co-leading an international initiative alongside Saudi Arabia. They're trying to organize a summit in New York, specifically focused on advancing the two-state solution.
A summit on the two-state solution, okay.
And the reports also mentioned that within France itself, in the government, in parliament, calls for France to actually officially recognize the state of Palestine are gaining steam.
Which Israel opposes strongly, presumably.
Vehemently, according to the sources, yeah.
And all of this diplomatic maneuvering, these political shifts, they're happening against that backdrop of just a dire humanitarian situation. The sources really emphasized that connection, didn't they?
Absolutely. It feels like a key driver. What's really stark in the reports is how they link these policy changes to the warnings coming from international organizations on the ground.
Any specifics?
Yeah, one really alarming detail from a UN report, nearly 14,000 children in Gaza were reportedly at risk of dying within 48 hours if urgent aid didn't get through immediately.
14,000 children within 48 hours. That just, It puts everything in sharp perspective.
It really does. And aid agencies, according to the material, are just describing the whole situation as catastrophic and unprecedented.
So pulling it all together, what kind of picture emerges from these sources?
I think the term used in some of the analysis was a strategic shift in French and potentially broader European foreign policy.
Strategic shift, meaning
after decades where support for Israel was, largely seen as unconditional, countries like France are now actively reevaluating. They're moving beyond just strong words towards potential concrete actions like sanctions, like reviewing that core economic treaty.
And citing humanitarian concerns and international law as the reason.
Precisely. That's the stated imperative.
So, based on everything we've reviewed, it really sounds like the next few days and weeks could be quite crucial.
Yeah, it seems that way. As the military operations continue and global pressure keeps mounting, the EU's whole approach, its relationship with Israel's government, it feels like it's potentially at a real turning point.
And France seems determined to be at the forefront of pushing for tangible changes.
That's the impression given by the sources, yes. Understanding these kinds of diplomatic recalibrations, these shifts, it helps you, the listener, see the different levers, the different pressure points that international players can try to use when they feel events are going in a direction they just deem unacceptable.
Which brings us right back to that tension described in the sources. France is trying to balance, on the one hand, supporting Israel's right to self-defense, but on the other, drawing this firm line against actions it calls unacceptable, especially regarding civilians and aid. So the question, I suppose, that lingers from reading all this is, how effective can that diplomatic pressure, including these potential economic measures like reviewing trade deals, how effective can it realistically be in achieving that balance, in actually changing the reality on the ground for civilians, for humanitarian access while still acknowledging security needs? It's quite the tightrope they're walking, a really complex situation to keep watching.